Welcome to the NCRS Insider, bringing you into the NCRS world with your host, Steve Thazier.
Hello everyone, it's been a while, but we're back to our Project LT1. In today's episode, we are taking a close look at the front and rear suspension for a 1970, which is also quite similar to most of the C3 generation. So let's get started. Information on the front and rear suspension are located on pages 224 through 237 of the 70 through 72 Technical NCRS Manual. We will start with the front suspension. It all connects to the front frame cross member that is part of the main frame. The top 8 arms are a semi-gloss black steel construction. The control arm shafts have a rubber bushing between them, and the A-arm and the ends have a large metal retainer, black plated bolt, and a cadmium plated lock washer. If the shaft is painted black, then the entire assembly with the hardware are also black. The control arms attach to the frame via 2 threaded studs at the top of the shock tower that have a zinc-plated split ring lock washer and a lock nut. There are a number of shims that are placed between the frame and the shaft for alignment purposes. At the front of the A-arm, the triangular-shaped ball joint is riveted in place with 3 rivets. It is a natural finish and has 7 spot welds around a circular groove. There is a grease fitting at the center. The bottom of the ball joint has a tapered shaft with a threaded end and a rubber boot. The lower control arm is much larger than the top, but is similar construction. The control arms are painted semi-gloss black, but the control arm shaft rubber bushings, retainer, and securing bolt are a natural finish. The control arm shaft attaches to the underneath side of the frame cross member with large natural retainers, black plated bolts, and zinc or cadmium plated lock washers. The ball joint is riveted to the A-arm on each side. There is a threaded stud protruding through the top of the A-arm with a grease fitting, and the bottom has a tapered shaft and rubber boot. The steering knuckle, which is a natural finish, goes through each of the ball joint shafts and is held in place by a castellated nut and a cotter pin that is bent up to the side of the nut. The front shock runs from the frame shock tower to the bottom A-arm. The top shock spindle protrudes through a small circular opening in the frame and has a rubber bushing and gray phosphate retainer and a natural nut at the top. The bottom of the shock is secured to the bottom of the lower control arm with 2 black phosphate bolts. The shocks are painted a semi-gloss grayish blue, including the rubber bushing at the bottom. At the bottom portion of the shock is a stamping identifying them as Pliocell on the top row, a part number and a Julian date with 2 numbers for the year on the middle row, and Delco Products Dayton, Ohio, USA at the very bottom. There is also a paper tag with a 2-letter broadcast code. The part number and the broadcast codes are identified in the NCRS manual. Around the shock is a natural finish spring which fits into the top shock tower and a depression on the lower control arm. There is a green paper tag around one of the coils with a 2-letter broadcast code and a GM part number in black letters. The front sway bar connects to the A-arms. The bar is 3/4 inch in diameter for the LT1, except those with the F41 suspension. They are either a natural finish or painted semi-gloss black. It attaches to the bottom side of the front frame with a steel bracket around a rubber bushing. The ends of the sway bar have a round opening where it connects to the linkage. The linkage consists of a long bolt facing upward with a WB head marking. In the center is a long split seam spacer with a K or a C stamping and 2 rubber bushings and steel retainers at each end capture the sway bar and the lower control arm. At the top side of the lower control arm, a rubber bumper bolts on with 2 bolts. Another rubber bumper is on the top side of the frame under the upper control arm. Let's move on to the rear suspension. A leaf spring runs the width of the rear end. It consists of 9 leaves bolted together with a natural finish bolt and nut at the very center. There are plastic liners between each leaf except for leaf 6 and 7 up from the bottom. Each leaf has a medium gray coating, except there is no coating on the plastic liners. The spring attaches to the underneath side of the differential. A semi-gloss plate is at the bottom, and there are 4 black phosphate bolts and washers that run up to the differential. On each end of the spring is a retaining cup that receives the linkage to the trailing arms. The linkage consists of black phosphate bolts with a natural lock washer, flat washers, and nuts. Rubber cushions sit below the spring and within the trailing arm. Trailing arms are painted semi-gloss black. They attach to the frame with long zinc-plated bolts with a flat washer on each side of the frame. On the inside end of the bolt is a lock washer, castellated nut, and cotter pin. The strut rods run in front of the leaf spring. The finish can either be a blue-gray color, black paint, or natural. The inner ends of the strut rods connect to a black dip-painted bracket attached to the bottom of the differential with 4 zinc-plated hex head bolts, split ring lock washers, and flat washers. A black phosphate-plated eccentric adjusting bolt slides through the bracket and the strut rod. Located at the back is a zinc-plated eccentric washer, a natural finish lock washer, and a tall nut. The outer end of the strut rod slips over the shock mounting bracket and between the bottom of the wheel housing assembly. A castellated nut and cotter pin secure it in place. The zinc-plated shock mounting bracket protrudes out the front side of the wheel bearing housing and has a 90-degree turn where the shock mounts. The rear shocks are similar to the front. They are attached to a bracket at the bottom side of the frame and to the shock mount at the bottom with a gray phosphate retaining washer installed with the concave side towards the center of the car and a split ring washer and nut. On the NCRS judging sheets, the suspension items we covered have a total of 44 originality points and 41 condition points for a total of 85. So that is a wrap on the LT1 suspension. Hopefully this gave you a better understanding of the C3 suspension and what it was like coming out of the factory. We'll catch you next time.